My children mentioned trips my wife never told me about. She snapped. Why are you questioning me? Then I found who she was meeting. I stayed quiet, gathered proof, and handed everything to her lover's wife. It started with something so ordinary I almost ignored it. My son, Benjamin, was 6. My daughter, Emma, was 4. They were still young enough to talk about their day without realizing when a small detail mattered. One evening, Benjamin was sitting at the kitchen table coloring while I cleaned up after dinner. Without looking up, he said, "Grandpa let me watch cartoons after lunch again." I turned around. "Grandpa?" He nodded. "Yeah. You went to Grandma and Grandpa's today?" "Yeah." He said it like I should already know. I didn't think much of it. Rachel's parents loved having the kids over. They lived far enough away that visiting them took some planning, but there was nothing unusual about Rachel taking Benjamin and Emma there once in a while. A few days later, Emma was eating breakfast when she said, "Grandma makes pancakes better." I smiled. "Does she?" She nodded seriously. "She made them yesterday." I stopped pouring coffee. "Yesterday?" "Yeah." Rachel had told me she spent most of the previous day running errands with the kids. I looked at Emma. "Did Mommy stay with you at Grandma's?" She shrugged. "Mommy went somewhere." That was the first moment something felt wrong. Not proof. Just a detail that didn't match what I had been told. That evening, after the kids were asleep, Rachel was sorting mail at the kitchen counter. I kept my voice casual. "Have you been taking the kids to your parents' place a lot lately?" She didn't look at me. "Sometimes. Benjamin said they were there earlier this week. My parents wanted to see them. Emma said they were there yesterday too." Rachel's hand stopped moving for half a second. Then she kept sorting envelopes. "So? I'm just asking." "Well, it sounds like you're interrogating me." I asked one question. She finally turned around. "Why are you questioning me?" I remember that sentence because until then, I hadn't been. But after the way she reacted, I started. "I just didn't realize you were driving out there that often. My mom helps with the kids sometimes. Is that suddenly a problem?" "No." "Then why are we talking about it?" She walked out before I could answer. Rachel had always had one tell when she lied. She became defensive before anyone accused her of anything. I didn't ask again. I watched. Her parents lived far enough away that several visits a week would add a noticeable amount of mileage to her car. So I started writing down the odometer reading. Nothing sophisticated. This was before location sharing and phone tracking became normal. Every few nights, after Rachel went to bed, I stepped into the garage and checked the number. The first week, her car had several hundred extra miles that didn't fit her usual routine. The next week was nearly the same. I tried to explain it away. Maybe she really was spending more time with her parents. Maybe someone in the family needed help. Maybe she was shopping somewhere farther away. But one question wouldn't leave me alone. If the trips were harmless, why hide them? Around the same time, I noticed Rachel had become more protective of the computer. We had one desktop in a small spare room. Back then, people signed in and out of email. Passwords got written on scraps of paper. Nothing followed you automatically from one device to another. One Saturday morning, I sat down at the computer. Beside the keyboard was a yellow sticky note. Rachel's AOL screen name. Underneath it was her password. I stared at it. I knew logging into her email was crossing a line. I also knew she had been lying to me. I logged in. At first, I found nothing. Family messages. Store promotions. Forwarded jokes. Then I saw an email thread between Rachel and her old college friend, Nicole. The subject line meant nothing. I opened it anyway. The first few messages were casual. Then I saw a man's name. Anthony. Nicole had written. "So you're still seeing him?" Rachel's reply was underneath. "Yes." I read it twice. Then I kept going. The messages weren't graphic. They didn't need to be. Rachel talked about meeting Anthony for lunch. About how difficult it was finding time because both of them had families. About dropping Benjamin and Emma with her parents so she could disappear for a few hours without raising questions. Nicole asked whether she was worried I would find out. Rachel replied, "He thinks I'm with the kids." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Anthony was someone Rachel had dated years before we met. He was married. He had children. In another exchange, Rachel and Nicole joked about Anthony's wife, Catherine. Rachel made a cruel remark about how Catherine had changed after having children and how Anthony barely noticed her anymore. That bothered me almost as much as the affair. I didn't know Catherine. But suddenly I could picture another person living inside the same lie. Making dinner. Taking care of children. Trusting someone who was secretly making a fool of her. I printed the emails. The printer sounded impossibly loud. Every mechanical click made me think Rachel would walk in. When the pages finished, I folded them, put them inside an old folder, and hid them in my vehicle. Then I logged out. 10 minutes later, Rachel passed the doorway carrying laundry. She stopped. "You okay?" I looked at her. Hair tied back. Old sweatshirt. Basket full of the kids' clothes. She looked completely normal. "Yeah. You look pale. Just tired." She nodded. "Can you help me fold these later?" "Sure." Then she walked away. That night, I lay beside her with 100 questions in my head. How long had it been going on? How often did they meet? Did her parents know? Had the kids ever seen Anthony? Was she planning to leave me? Was he planning to leave Catherine? But I knew confronting Rachel immediately would only warn her. She could delete messages. Change her routine. Call Anthony. Rewrite the story. I needed facts. A friend of mine, Brian, worked in law enforcement. I called him the next day. I didn't give him every detail. I told him I had found evidence that Rachel might be involved with another man and asked what I should do. His first response was immediate. "Do not follow them yourself." "I wasn't planning to." "I mean it. I heard you. And don't confront the guy. I barely know who he is." "That's probably better." Brian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I know someone." That someone was Dennis. Dennis had previously worked in law enforcement, and later became a private investigator. When I called him, he asked practical questions. "What days is she usually free?" I told him. "Where do her parents live?" I told him that too. "Do you have anything besides suspicion?" "Emails." "Bring copies." We met a few days later. I slid the printed pages across the table. Dennis read them slowly. Then he looked at me. "You sure you want this confirmed?" "I already saw the emails." "That's not what I asked?" I didn't answer. He leaned back. "Suspicion leaves room for hope. Evidence usually doesn't. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with." Dennis nodded. "Then that's what we'll find out." The first few days produced nothing. Rachel went to work. Bought groceries. Picked up the kids. For one brief moment, I wondered if the affair had ended. Then Dennis called. "I've got movement." My stomach tightened. "What happened?" "I want another day before I give you the full report." "Why?" "Because one meeting can be explained away. A pattern can't." Over the next week, he documented exactly that. Rachel would take Benjamin and Emma to her parents' house. Her parents believed she was running errands or handling appointments. They had no idea. After dropping off the kids, Rachel would meet Anthony. Sometimes they ate lunch first. Then they went to the same inexpensive motel. A few hours later, Rachel returned to her parents' house, picked up Benjamin and Emma, and drove home. By the time I got back, everything looked normal. Dennis showed me photographs. Nothing explicit. Just enough. Rachel's car. Anthony's car. The two of them meeting. The motel parking lot. Times. Dates. The same routine repeated. I stared at one picture of Rachel walking beside him. She was smiling. Dennis asked, "Do you recognize him?" "No." "You want me to identify him?" "Yes." A few days later, Dennis called again. "I found Anthony." We met. Anthony was married to Catherine. They had 3 children. He also worked in a senior sales role at a company controlled by Catherine's family. That detail mattered because most of Anthony's comfortable life seemed tied to them. His career. His home. His stability. I looked at Dennis. "And Catherine doesn't know?" "Not that I can tell." I sat back. By then, I already knew I was filing for divorce. Infidelity had been part of my childhood too. Both of my parents had cheated during their marriage. My siblings and I grew up around suspicion, accusations, screaming matches, and long stretches of silence. We became messengers between adults who should have been speaking to each other. We learned how to read the mood of a room before walking into it. I promised myself I would never recreate that kind of home for my own children. Some marriages survive betrayal. Maybe some become stronger afterward. But I knew myself. If I stayed with Rachel, I would question everything. Every late arrival. Every unexplained call. Every new password. I would spend years policing a marriage I no longer trusted. That wasn't the life I wanted Benjamin and Emma growing up inside. So I hired a divorce attorney named Rebecca. I showed her the emails and Dennis's report. She read everything, then closed the folder. I need you to separate what hurts from what matters legally. I nodded. The affair is emotionally important. But your priorities need to be the children, finances, housing, and a stable custody arrangement. That's what I want. Good. Then don't make impulsive decisions. She told me not to drain accounts. Not to threaten Rachel or Anthony. Not to create public drama. Anything done out of anger could make the divorce harder. Then I asked her one more question. What if Anthony's wife doesn't know? Rebecca looked at me. What are you thinking? She deserves the same information I have. That is different from trying to destroy him. I know. Keep it factual and private. That became the plan. No public confrontation. No contact with Anthony. I would file for divorce. Rachel would be served. On the same day, Dennis would privately show Catherine the evidence. After that, the decisions were hers. The days leading up to it were brutal. Rachel had no idea. She talked about bills, school schedules, groceries. One evening, she complained that the dryer was making a strange noise. I stood there listening while thinking. In a week, we won't be married. The only thing that kept me focused was Benjamin and Emma. Whatever happened next, they would not become part of the revenge. When the day came, Rachel left for work like she always did. She kissed Emma. Reminded Benjamin to take his school folder. Then she looked at me. Can you grab milk later? Yeah. Thanks. She picked up her bag. See you tonight. A few hours later, she was served with divorce papers at work. At almost the same time, Dennis met Catherine. I stayed away. Dennis later told me Catherine was confused at first. Then he explained that he had information involving her husband. He gave her the report. Showed her the dates. The photographs. The pattern. Then the emails. Catherine barely spoke. At one point, she asked, "Does the other woman's husband know?" Dennis said yes. She sat quietly for a moment. Then she asked my first name. When Dennis told her, Catherine said, "Tell him I'm sorry." That stayed with me. She was apologizing to me for something neither of us had done. Rachel called less than half an hour after being served. I ignored the first few calls. Eventually, I answered. Her voice was shaking. "What is this?" "You know what it is." "Divorce papers?" "Yes." "Why?" I closed my eyes. She knew. She had to know. But she still asked? "Gregory talked to me. I know about Anthony." Silence. Then she asked, "Who told you?" That question changed something in me. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Her first instinct was to figure out how the secret had escaped. "It doesn't matter." "How long have you known?" "Long enough." "You went through my email?" "I know what you've been doing." "Gregory, listen." "No. It's not as simple as you think. It's simple enough. You don't know everything. I know you left our children with your parents so you could meet him." Her voice broke. "I never put the kids in danger. That isn't the point. They were safe. You used your parents as cover while they watched our children. I did not use the kids." I could feel my anger rising, so I lowered my voice. "I'm not having this conversation over the phone. Please don't do this. The papers have already been filed. What about Benjamin and Emma? They will be protected from this. You're breaking up their family." That nearly made me lose my temper. But I didn't shout. "No. I'm responding to what already happened." Then I ended the call. That evening, the kids were with Rachel's parents. Rachel had called her mother crying and asked if they could stay overnight. By the time I returned home to collect a few things, Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table. The divorce papers were in front of her. Her eyes were swollen. "Please sit down. I'm getting some clothes." "Gregory." I stopped. "What?" "I need to explain. You've had months to tell me. It wasn't supposed to happen." I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because I didn't know what else to do with that sentence. What wasn't supposed to happen? "I ran into Anthony." "When?" She looked down. "About a year ago." "A year?" "We started talking." "For a year?" "It wasn't like this the whole time." "What was it like?" She wiped her face. "At first, we just talked." "And then?" She didn't answer. I said, "How long were you meeting him?" "A few months." "While telling me you were taking the kids to your parents?" "I was taking them there." And then leaving. They were with my parents. Did your parents know? No. Good. She frowned. What does that mean? It means they weren't helping you hide it. They didn't know anything. They thought you were running errands. Yes. So you lied to them too? She looked away. Then she said, Anthony was unhappy. I stared at her. We were discussing the end of our marriage, and she was explaining Anthony's feelings to me. Was he? His marriage had problems. And ours? She hesitated. That was answer enough. You weren't exactly happy either, she said. No marriage is happy every second. You don't understand. Then explain it. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I picked up my bag. That was when she asked, Did you contact Anthony? No. Her shoulders loosened slightly. Then I said, His wife knows. Rachel's face changed. What? Catherine knows. She stood up. You told her? She deserved to know. Oh my God! What? You had no right. I stared at her. No right? You don't know their marriage. I know he's married. You don't know what she's like. I don't need to. Rachel started pacing. You have no idea what this could do. To who? To everyone. Now you're worried about consequences. That's not fair. Was Catherine given a choice about any of this? Rachel stopped. You wanted revenge. I thought about it. Part of me probably did. But that wasn't the whole reason. I wanted her to know what her marriage actually was. You knew Anthony could lose everything. Then maybe he shouldn't have risked everything. She stared at me. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. Behind me, Rachel said, Gregory, please. I stopped. For 1 second, I thought she might finally say something that showed she understood what she had done. Instead, she said, Don't let this destroy him. That was the moment the marriage ended for me completely. Our children were sleeping somewhere else because their family had just broken apart. Divorce papers were on the kitchen table. And she was still worried about Anthony. I looked at her. His choices are his problem now. Then I left. I did not contact Anthony's employer or his family. Catherine had the evidence. What she did with it was up to her. From what I later learned, she spoke to an attorney almost immediately. She protected access to money she was legally entitled to, documented their shared finances, and took the children to stay with her parents while everything was sorted out. Her father eventually learned why. Because Anthony worked for a company controlled by Catherine's family, his job became unstable very quickly. Before long, he no longer worked there. The house became another problem. It was owned through Catherine's family, so once the marriage collapsed, arrangements were eventually made for Anthony to leave. Within a relatively short period, he lost the marriage, the job, and the home he had treated as permanent. Rachel heard some of those updates through people still connected to Anthony and his social circle. One afternoon, while we were discussing the kids' schedule, she suddenly said, Anthony lost his job. I didn't respond. She stared at me. Did you hear me? Yes. His wife's father got rid of him. That has nothing to do with me. You told her? Yes. You knew this could happen. I knew she deserved the truth. Rachel shook her head. You ruined his life. I didn't make his decisions. You wanted this. I wanted the lying to stop. That sounds like revenge. Call it what you want. She folded her arms. You knew what you were doing. Yes. That surprised her. I continued. I knew Catherine deserved the chance to decide what happened in her own marriage. Everything after that belonged to the people involved. Rachel said nothing. We never had another serious conversation about Anthony. Our divorce moved forward. It wasn't pleasant, but it never became the kind of war I had grown up watching. Rebecca kept reminding me not to let anger make decisions for me. So I focused on the practical things. Custody. Finances. School schedules. Holidays. Housing. All the dull, painful details that replace a marriage once the emotional part is over. I never used Benjamin or Emma as leverage. I never told them why we were divorcing. When Benjamin asked why I was living somewhere else, I told him. Sometimes parents are better at taking care of their kids when they live in different homes. He frowned. Are you and Mom mad? We're working through adult problems. Did I do something? That question nearly broke me. I knelt in front of him. No. Did Emma? No. Then why? This has nothing to do with either of you. Do you still love us? Every day. He hugged me. That was the moment I knew I had made the right choice about one thing. Whatever Rachel and I felt toward each other, our children would not carry it for us. Over time, our conversations became practical. Benjamin has practice at 5. Emma needs her school project Thursday. I'll pick them up Sunday. Dentist appointment moved. That became our relationship. And honestly, it worked. Anthony's situation became more complicated over the following year. I only heard fragments. Some came through public records. Some through mutual connections. At first, Anthony apparently believed Catherine would eventually calm down and take him back. She didn't. He repeatedly tried to confront her about the separation. She asked for distance. He kept pushing. One confrontation at the family property became heated. Catherine's brother stepped in. There was a brief physical altercation, and police were called. After that, the boundaries became formal. Legal orders. Restricted contact. More lawyers. Anthony kept turning consequences into new conflicts. That was what eventually created further legal trouble. I stayed out of it. When Rachel once tried to update me about another incident, I stopped her. I don't need to know. She looked at me. You started all this. No. I found out about it. After that, she stopped bringing him up. Years passed. The sharp edges faded. Benjamin grew taller. Emma stopped needing help tying her shoes. School concerts became graduations. Birthdays turned into teenage arguments. Then somehow they were adults. Time has a strange way of shrinking disasters. When the divorce happened, it felt like the entire world. Years later, it became one chapter. Rachel and I occasionally stood in the same room for the kids. School events. Graduations. Family milestones. We were polite. That was enough. Several years after the divorce, Rachel and I were waiting outside Benjamin's school after a meeting. The kids weren't around. She suddenly said, "Do you ever wonder if we could have saved it?" I looked at her. No. The answer came quickly. She looked hurt. You never even considered it? I considered it. Then why not? I thought about how to answer without trying to punish her. Because I knew what staying would turn me into. She frowned. What does that mean? Every time you were late, I would wonder. She looked away. Every unexplained trip. Every strange phone call. Every password change. I could have earned your trust back. Maybe. Maybe? I don't know. That's not fair. No. It isn't. She looked at me. That's why I left. She was quiet. I continued. If I stayed and spent 10 years questioning everything you did, that wouldn't be forgiveness. Benjamin and Emma would have grown up watching us slowly destroy each other. Rachel knew enough about my parents to understand. I wasn't going to make them live inside that. After a moment, she asked, Do you hate me? No. She seemed surprised. Why not? Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying that. That was the last meaningful conversation we ever had about our marriage. Years later, Benjamin asked me directly. He was already an adult. We were sitting together after dinner when he said, Dad, did Mom cheat on you? I didn't answer immediately. Why are you asking? I've heard things. From who? Family. Bits and pieces. I could have lied. I didn't. Yes. He looked down. That's why you divorced? Yes. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, Was that why we were always at Grandma and Grandpa's? That question hurt. Yes. He looked up sharply. They knew? No. I answered immediately. They had no idea. You're sure? Yes. Your mom told them she had errands or things she needed to do. He nodded slowly. I could see him rearranging old childhood memories in his head. Then he asked, Why didn't you tell us? You were children. But later? You deserved to have your own relationship with your mother. Even after what she did? What happened between your mom and me was between us. He shook his head slightly. I don't know if I could do that. You don't know what you'll do until you're responsible for protecting someone smaller than you. He thought about that. Then he said, You guys never fought in front of us. We fought. Not where we could see it. No. Why? Because when I was growing up, my parents made their marriage everyone else's problem. He nodded. And you didn't want that for us. No. Benjamin sat quietly. Then he said, Thanks. That one word meant more to me than anything Anthony lost. Because in the end, that was the outcome I cared about. My children got through the divorce without becoming weapons in somebody else's anger. As for Anthony, he eventually disappeared from the circles where people knew him. The last reliable thing I heard was that he moved away and started over somewhere else. I never went looking for more. Catherine seemed to rebuild. She became more involved in her family's company, took on greater responsibility, and eventually helped run it after her father stepped back. I never contacted her. She never contacted me. There was no friendship between us. No dramatic reunion. We were simply two strangers who had been living inside the same lie. And I never regretted making sure she knew. Not because I enjoyed what happened afterward. By then, I understood that revenge burns hot for a while and then real life takes over. Benjamin needed rides. Emma needed help with homework. Bills came. People got older. The kids graduated. Life kept moving. Eventually, Anthony became irrelevant to me. So did the affair. Even Rachel became someone I mostly thought about in the context of our children. Now that Benjamin and Emma are adults, Rachel and I rarely communicate. I don't wish her harm. She is my children's mother. They love her, and that matters to me because they matter to me. But that chapter of my life is closed. Looking back, people might assume the marriage ended when I found the emails. For me, it ended later. It ended in that kitchen. Divorce papers on the table. Our children somewhere else because everything had changed. And Rachel looking at me and saying, "Don't let this destroy him." Even then, part of her was still trying to protect Anthony from the consequences of the choices they had made. I didn't have to destroy his life. I only stopped helping the lie survive. Then I gave Catherine the truth and let her decide what her own future looked like. So was I justified in telling Anthony's wife everything, or did I cross the line by making sure the secret they built their affair around finally disappeared?